Alright, so today we're filling in sections 3, 4, and 5 in your vocabulary packet. Okay, so 3 being a few more music-based verbs, 4 being items needed in order to do these activities. Honestly, not a hugely important vocabulary section, but words that you probably should know. And then arguably the most important, section 5, our 4 seasons and how to say when things happen. So beginning with section 3, our music. Okay, anytime we talk about playing music, we have, of course, our base verb to play, which you should already know. We've covered that multiple times in class already. The verb is jouer. And then we'll just continue on with whichever instrument it is we're discussing. For example, to play the piano becomes jouer du piano. Remember, with your cognates, we have to make sure that we are getting the pronunciation correct. It's very easy to look at them and just say jouer du piano because we already know that word in English. However, it's blatantly obvious that it stops the flow of our sentence. So there's not a huge pronunciation difference between piano and piano, but we do have to add in that little bit of an accent. To play the guitar has similar problems, so jouer de la guitare. Note that we do spell guitar differently than we spell guitar. And so this is still considered a cognate. You can have small spelling differences and still be considered a cognate. But that makes it particularly tricky, not just in pronunciation, but also in the spelling. So don't miss that final E. You have to have that final E after the R in French. And then finally, for this section, to play the drums, this is my personal favorite, jouer de la batterie. So if you think about battery, as in the crime of assault and battery is beating someone up. Okay, so if you jouer de la batterie, okay, literally we're playing beating things up. We're playing the drums. Section 4, our items needed. So this is kind of a honestly random smattering of different nouns that your book could put together with these verbs because your book could. So beginning with a digital camera, okay, we're going to call it an l'appareil photo numérique. Okay, the numérique is the digital part of this. That's not actually required if you just want to say like grab my camera, okay? You could stop after photo, appareil photo. Note that this is a masculine word. We don't see the le because appareil begins with an A, which is of course a vowel, but that still doesn't make it any other thing. It's still a masculine word, even if you can't see the le. A camcorder, le caméscope. It's extremely important here that you remember that accent. And remember that when we have an accent, that's not only going to change our pronunciation, so that E accent aigu makes an A sound, but that's also where the stress of our word is. Caméscope. A helmet, le casque. You remember QUE is just that K sound, le casque. A racket, like a tennis racket in this particular case. Super easy peasy, la raquette. And then finally, skis, arguably even easier, les skis. Okay, it is a masculine word, though just like in English, you never really see this in the plural. We don't really talk about, I have a ski. We say, I have skis. It's a pair of skis. You have to have both of them in order for them to be worth anything. So the masculine here really only matters if we're worrying about adding on an adjective or something like that. So if we were going to add on like a color, so if we were going to say, for example, les skis blancs, we'd have to know that we use blanc instead of blanche. Other than that, your article really doesn't change. All right, and then number 5, our seasons. Okay. If you remember nothing else of what we talked about today, this is the one that I want you to focus on the most, this section here, section number 5. We're going to be talking a lot over the next week or so about when things happen, being able to mention seasons, months, days of the week, all of those sorts of things. So spring, le printemps. Every single one of our seasons is going to be masculine, though we'll discuss why and how that matters. In a lot of sentences, it won't actually care. But we do need to know it's a le, and we'll get into the whys later. Right now, just jot it down somewhere, but focus primarily on that word printemps. Summer is été, is also a masculine word. All of our seasons are. Été. Fall or autumn is a cognate with autumn, l'automne. Remember that an AU combination says O, so we have automne, not autumn. This is a very distinct pronunciation difference between French and English, even though it's still a cognate. Be very, very careful with that. And then finally, winter, we have hiver. Remember, we do not say H's at the beginnings of words. So it's not hiver, it's hiver. Remember as well that our ER, especially at the ends, that makes A. When we are discussing in a particular season, so if we want to say, for example, I play basketball in the winter. All of our seasons will take en. So for example, in summer would be en été, en automne, en hiver, except for spring. Even though spring is still a masculine word, even though it's still a season, even though there's no grammatical difference, it's going to take O. Just because it does. There's not a particular rhyme or reason to it, it just does. So it's au printemps. If you do something in the springs, like say you play spring baseball, et je joue au printemps. But if you play baseball in the fall, je joue en automne. Spring is the only season that does this. Make sure that you have this down in your notes. Great big huge bold font, underlined 20 times. Make sure you know it. When we're trying to put this into a sentence, okay, all we have to do is add on the into the sentences we can already use. We've seen this very briefly last semester when we started talking about places, so being able to say that you do something at school or at home. We can do that exact same thing with all of this other information, such as our whens, our with whoms, with whats, all of that. Okay, so for example, our base sentence, I play tennis, je joue au tennis. This is the sort of sentence that we've been putting together all year. When I want to give more information, I play tennis in the spring, all I have to do is stick the in the spring onto the end of my sentence. Je joue au tennis au printemps. We don't do anything else fancy to it. It works the exact same way as English. I'm just going to continue my sentence by giving you more information. I can do this as many times as I want. If I want to say I play tennis with my friends in the spring. Je joue au tennis avec mes amis au printemps. Adding in as many of these phrases as I feel like, I can make my sentence as long and as detailed as I want. There's no difference in between the French and the English word order when it comes to these kinds of details. In fact, just like in English, we don't always have to start with the subject. We can include these details at the very beginning of the sentence if I feel like. So if I want to say, in the spring, I play tennis. Au printemps, je joue au tennis. The exact same thing. this is one area where we can translate fairly directly from English into French and vice versa.